With the invitation by Councilperson Moto, and please remain standing then for the pledge to the flag. Call to order.
Let us take a moment of silence for the passing of our 41st President, George H.W. Bush. Services took place today. He was a member of the Great Generation, a World War II veteran, a statesman, a family man. Public service was a duty and a calling for him and his family. Let us all celebrate his life by following his footsteps and recognize it is our turn to work together so we can all say we will leave this city a little better than we found it. We will leave this city a little better than we found it. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Raise lighting the menorah at PPL Center.
So Hamlin, I guess roll call, we can just see that everybody's here except for the mayor.
He's lighting the menorah.
Okay, so we'll move on to courtesy of the floor. This is for items that are not on tonight's agenda. Right, the election, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Hirsch, I always get
Or
to see.
whatever you had. Last Monday evening, Mr. Brady, Mr. Hendricks, Mr. McLean, and Mr. Zuko had tried to help the people of Allentown by lowering the real estate tax, but they were unsuccessful. I want to read you some information that I have that was in the morning call. Why we do need help in Allentown. Mr. Robinson doesn't think the people in Allentown need help. He said they're willing to pay or willing to pay. It's all heard from, they're willing to pay. Let me read some information. So maybe Mr. Robinson will change his mind. The first one will be, Allentown had the biggest federal earned income tax credit in the city, out of 122 cities in the United States. You know what that means, Mr. Chairman? It means we were among the poorest and more poor people. And what happens, Mr. Chairman, that 127 for 20% can raise our taxes for homeowners and do not raise rent for renters. And my next one, Mr. Chairman, the morning call also, I'm reading the morning call now. The morning call also published about Lehigh Valley, Lehigh County is part of, among the 10 poorest cities, municipalities in a two-kind area. Allentown had 4 areas out of the 10. Let me read a few of them. The one area had 51% of the population poverty. The next one, Mr. Chairman, the next area was 46% poverty. And then the next one was 40% poverty, Mr. Chairman. But we have some councilmen that don't figure that these people should get a break. They should lose their homes, Mr. Chairman. I forgot the list. I got it from a realtor. He gave me a list of 800 names, properties that could be, are on foreclosure list, or in the process of being foreclosed. So, Mr. Chairman, what is City Council going to do to help the poor, the ones on poverty, and the ones that are homes that could be under foreclosure, and maybe we could save them from going on? So I hope something can be done tonight, because Allentown is in bad shape. People cannot afford 27%, Mr. Robinson. Maybe you can afford it, but what I just read, those people cannot afford it, 27% tax increase. I hope this evening something is done. If not, I hope I'm going to call this something about how our city council helps out poor people in poverty, or people that follow their income tax credit because they're poor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Hirschman. It was kind of on the edge of what's on the agenda tonight, but anybody else for courtesy of the floor? Okay.
No, hold on one second.
Okay. We've never did this before. My name is Tara Lopez and I'm from Valley Youth House. So my name is Tara Lopez and I'm 19 years old. I live in Allentown practically my whole life. Today I'm here to share my story so I'm able to educate everyone on the struggles many youth in Allentown are going through right now. I first got involved with children and youth because there was abuse going on in my home. I was in 7th grade when I realized that enough was enough and I did not want to continue to live in fear and live a lie. I reached out to my school guidance counselor and confided in them, and I had told them what was going on at home, and immediately they had took action and got in touch with my mom and children and youth. At that time, I was terrified because the future was unknown, and I think that was the scariest feeling, not knowing what was going to happen next. Over the next few years of my life, they were changed forever. I was placed at a youth shelter for some time until I was able to be placed into my first foster home. The youth shelter was a great resource, and I think there should be more youth outreach shelters in Center City. There was very limited space, and I shared a room with 4 other girls. Although the staff was great and the situation wasn't ideal, it was very bearable. I was then placed into my first foster home, and I was away from my close family and friends. It was very scary because I was entering a stranger's home, someone I never knew before. Unfortunately, I only stayed with that family for about a year and I was placed back home. Shortly after returning home, I was then placed back into care for the second time. I had switched schools many times throughout my high school career because I moved around a lot. I lived in about 4 to 5 different foster homes. Growing up, I wanted more independence and freedom, and I felt like I was lacking that. I wasn't able to get my permit or my license, and it took a toll on me. Everyone in school was progressing, and I felt as though I was stuck. I began to stand up and let my voice be heard, and I told my caseworkers that I wanted more freedom and independence. I had then transitioned into independent living, and it was amazing. I had finally got my first job, and I was closer to my friends and family. I was back in the city again where I could utilize the public transportation. I was in my senior year, and I was attending high school at Deerfield High School. I graduated from Deerfield, and I was ready to take the next steps in my life. When I turned 18, I signed myself out of CYS Care, which is Children and Youth Services Care. I thought that I was going to be successful because I had been working and saving money, and I was ready for the next steps in life. Once I signed out of care, I did not expect for life to be so hard and difficult. I had all the right intentions because I wanted to get my permit and license and my own apartment, but I was not able to obtain any of my goals because I did not have stable housing. I was bouncing back and forth from my girlfriend's house to my mom's house and other family members. Luckily, it wasn't too late. I realized that I did not want to live that way, and I had then re-entered care because I realized having a stable housing was the most important and vital thing I needed in my life at that time. When I realized having stable housing was the most important thing, I had re-entered care and things were different because I was already 18 and I had more freedom. Independent living has been the biggest blessing in my life, and I was able to obtain my license, and I've been working really hard. I currently attend Northampton Community College and I major in social work. My dream is to be a social worker so I can change the lives of other youth and help our community, and I believe having a youth resource center will be very beneficial to our community.
And just want to,
Sir, before you get started, would you please remove your hat while you're up here? Thank you very much. Go ahead.
in 2 quantitative study gathering, both you
Excuse me, did you mind,
Oh,
use the microphone? Tell us your name, please.
My name is Kevin Wade, it's nice to meet you guys. In 2 quantitative data gathering projects, both youth and homeless service providing identifies the navigating services in Allentown as a major barrier. Youth in these studies also identified a need for assistance in life skills and managing tasks toward independence. We have identified that not enough youth people in Allentown are learning the life skills needed to maintain independent young adults. Youth research centers will be a center location for the focus and the welcoming for youth, young people throughout Allentown where any of all needs can be met. This would be assistance not only youth experiencing homelessness, but also Allentown's kids and young people who are not getting the necessary support in home or school. We're hoping for a teen-friendly setting established with youth participation, not like an unwelcoming and confusing office throughout the building representing for various resources which have welcome spaces where we could meet with appropriate providers. We think there should be people there to help us with employment, county assistance benefits, education, health and wellness, transportation, childcare linkage, counseling for mental health and drug and alcohol services, life skills, and mentoring for support for kids involved in trafficking, domestic violence and abuse, or gangs. Unfortunately, many of such providers are already on the table collaborating on this project.
I know we ran out of time, but really quick, if there had been a youth resource center like this one, when I signed out of Lehigh County CYS care, I would have been more successfully on my own. We are grateful for the resources currently available, but we feel like all Allentown youth who are experiencing housing instability right now, there isn't enough resources. We're here to begin a conversation to change the future lives of our young people and improve our community, and we would love to unite with the city of Allentown in developing and implementing this project. Will you unite with us on this project so that we can change the future lives of our young people and change our community for the better?
I think that sounds like a worthwhile project, and, it sounds like that might be up your alley there, Mr. Robinson.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
Mr. President, and
Well,
yes, of
Yes.
course. If you guys could just please give in your information to Mr. Hanlon over here at the
Yes,
end.
we actually brought handouts with us.
Oh, great.
So if you'd like, we can distribute them to you
That would be
guys,
good.
and then you guys can read more about
Does
the
it have
project.
contact information for you
Yes, it
guys on
does.
as well? Perfect, because I'm chair of the Community Economic Development Committee. So this is certainly something that we'd like to talk with you guys about more and see if
Okay.
there's any way that we can be helpful in really helping you guys do what you're trying to do. And I applaud you for doing this and coming here tonight to speak about it. Thank you very much.
Thank
You're
you
welcome.
so much.
Thank you.
If you just want to give the handouts to Mr. Hamlin, then you'll see that they're distributed, but again, thank you, it was a good job for the
Yes.
first time, relax, you did.
Yes, you did a great job.
Thank you.
Anybody else for courtesy of the floor?
Good evening again, Tom Hardy, Allentown. For those of you who I send emails to and don't respond, or have me on spam and don't even know I sent it, I would like to give you the quote of the evening. Oh, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive. I hope this doesn't apply to the rest of the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Hahn. Okay, Mr. Zuko.
I just wanted to comment and say something to you, ma'am.
Oh,
It seems like you've already made your life a success, and I think you're just now helping others do the same.
Yes,
I
that's
just
what
wanted to tell
I
you
plan
that.
on doing. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It means a lot.
All right, thank you. Anybody else for courtesy of the floor? Seeing nobody. Approval of minutes, Mr. Hamlin.
There are none.
Okay, then they're approved. Any old business? Seeing none, communication. No communication? Okay, reports from the committee. Budget and Finance, Mr. Green.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Budget and Finance Committee has not met since the last council meeting. However, there is a meeting scheduled for before the next council meeting, which is on December 19th. And at 7 o'clock, the meeting, our Finance Committee meeting will be probably around 6:30. We'll let you know. And we'll be discussing the monthly finances and one bill that's going to be presented.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garidi. Community and Economic Development, Mr. Robinson.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. The committee has not met since the last council meeting, and no future meetings are scheduled at this time. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Human Resources Administration Appointments, Ms. Papa.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee met this evening, but no future meetings are scheduled.
Thank you very much. Parks and Recreation, Ms. Mura.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee has not met since the last council meeting. No future meeting are not scheduled.
Okay, thank you very much. Public Safety, Mr. Hendricks.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee has not met since last meeting, and no future meeting is currently planned.
Thank you very much. Public Works, Mr. Zuko.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee has not met since last council meeting, and no future meetings are scheduled.
All right, thank you, Mr. Zuko. Rules, Chambers, Intergovernmental Relations and Strategy, that's me. We have not met since the last meeting, and we have no future meeting planned. And contrary to the agenda, it says that in the spirit of Hanukkah, there would be no report this evening. Mr. Glazer informs us that he has two. So maybe that's his gift.
As Courtney stole what I was about to say, it is in fact a Hanukkah miracle. We have not one report, not two reports, but three, and I thank you all for ceding your time to me.
Mr. Hammond, if you would start at 2 minutes, please.
At the risk of putting off the main event, I would like to say that I think certainly over the budget hearings and some of the audit reports that I've given recently and will give tonight, council and the public will see that the Controller's Office makes a definite contribution to the city and in terms of how efficiently we run and how efficiently we use our resources. To that end, an accounts payable weekly check review, this is really for the month of November. We reviewed 342 checks for a little bit over $3 million, 12 wires for $712,000. First finding, wires not reviewed by the Controller's Office. The Controller's Office performs a cursory review of wires to ensure payments are made and timely and the payments correspond to the documentation. On November 2018, 2 wires were issued and processed without the Controller's approval. One was an Eden invoice, where the Controller was not in the approval queue, and one was a wire for payment for a P card, and we're going to get into P cards in a little bit. The Controller's Office is not part of the individual Eden approval queues there. Both HR and purchasing and treasury were advised of the issues, and administration will explore solutions to these issues. We noted that on some checks, incorrect expense accounts were used. There were 3 invoices. All the departments agreed to make transfers to correct those issues. We noted that there were 16 checks for about 20 invoices that were paid late. All the departments were advised of the lateness and all responded with the reasons as to such. And then we had one invoice that paid sales tax for $1. The department was advised. The next audit, the problem came to light when I was doing the budget review. I did a deep dive on invoices for as many departments as I could. And this audit has to do with the PMA companies. And the PMA companies provide risk management solutions and servicing for the city. We have 2 contracts with them. One has to do with workman's compensation, and another has to do with the self-insured auto program. They administer the claims for us. So we've got 2 different contracts in 2 different, in risk, but in 2 different bureaus, one in property and casualty and one in workman's comp. The object of the review is to determine whether payments made to PMA companies for handling charges were made in compliance with the contract, to determine whether the invoices are properly categorized for billing purposes, and determine whether there were any opportunities for improvement in the process. And basically, in workman's comp, we looked at invoices for the 2018 contract year. For the automobile program, we looked at payments from May 2017 till present. Our findings were, number 1, there were overpayments in the amount of $14,258 on these contracts. We found the workers' compensation was overpaid $9,371 in the third quarter of 2018, and the automobile program was overpaid by $4,887 in July of 2018. Our recommendation is that where applicable, funds for overpayment should be requested, and the future payment should be verified to ensure that no additional overpayments are charged. The administration responds. The overpayment, part of the overpayment was applied to outstanding invoices, and the city will receive a credit towards payment in 2019, and the other part will be for the last installment due in 2018. So we'll save a little money going forward. We noticed that invoices were processed against the wrong expense account. As I said, we have 2 different accounts, one in property and casualty, one in the workman's comp, and we found that some of the workman's comp invoices were charged to property and casualty. And we suggest that the transfers be done to rectify that, and the administration responds that they will work with finance to correct this error. We also noted that in Eden, there are two PMA vendors, one that we currently use and one that must be an artifact when we actually bought insurance from them as opposed to the services that we now purchase. Some of the invoices were paid to the old company. And I expect that they'll make that company not active. So just to recap, we've two major things. One, overpayments that we found that we'll get credit for, part in this fiscal year, part in next fiscal year, and also the payments were processed to the wrong bureau. The last brief audit report has to do with P cards, and I don't know if purchasing has made a presentation to council on that. If not, very briefly. P cards will take the place of purchase orders below $3,999. It will save the city in purchasing a tremendous amount of time and paperwork. It'll allow vendors to be paid quicker. It'll allow our folks in the field to go out and get the purchases they need without having to wait for purchase orders, as long as it's below that $3,999 limit, because above that, you need to get bids. Any number of us here have had P-card training, I am sure, and I don't know whether it's going to change my life, but it'll certainly help the departments in the field. And this is, and the other news is that the city gets a rebate for using it. It's not a ton of money, but it is something coming back to us. Our office reviews all transactions paid using the P-card. Testing includes a review of invoices being paid and their corresponding documentation, approvals, and compliance to aims and reasonableness of expenditure. Now, that we noted that we weren't on the queue when it actually goes to the bank. We hope that gets rectified shortly. But we do get the paperwork after the wire's been paid to verify it, okay? And this review really has to do with that. Two issues. One is that there were no identifying numbers on the individual transaction documentation. When an invoice is entered into Eden for payment, Eden assigns a document number to the transaction. The document number is used to trace invoices through the AP module. We identified two card holders that were not writing the document or vendor numbers on the documentation, thereby eliminating the procedural audit trail. I can tell you we spent an awful lot of time chasing those documents down. The departments were advised of the issue, and purchasing sent out an email to all P-card holders, reminding them to write the Eden document number on supporting documentation. And we identified two transactions which offered a discount of 2% if the invoice is paid within 10 days, which they absolutely are with the P-card. And the departments were advised of this discount, and they will seek they will seek reimbursement from the vendor. So this is a good system for the city, and we've met with purchasing and finance to make sure that we have an audit trail going forward, and that's my report, sir.
Thank you very much, and I do want to thank you for all your assistance in the budget process. It's very much appreciated.
Welcome, sir. Thank you.
The last city control I remember doing that was Mr. Hirschman, sitting in the back here, so you're going to run for his money.
And you remember that?
Yes, I do. And you're going to get put in the queue so that you sign off on it before checks go out, or? I think that would probably be wise. I mean,
Well, P-card is one check, and it's not even a check.
I'm talking about the other ones. You said that goes no.
HR, yeah, that was pretty much an anomaly. Well, it happens occasionally.
Yeah.
And those wires tend to be the benefit, the insurance payments for health and stuff.
As long as you're comfortable with it.
I like to see them all.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir.
Yes, Mr. President, just congratulate you and give you kudos for all you've been doing this year. in addition to that, I think the issue with the P cards is one that it's very well used. I requested the P card years ago, and I'm glad to see that it's finally being done, and it's a good way to measure how much we spend. We also get some kind of discounts from different, I know for Staples sometimes for office supplies and things like that in other companies. I think it's a process that is gonna help us a lot more, and it's verified because you actually get a bank statement every month of that. Whatever anybody purchases with it will be there, and they have to. So do you see those statements as well, or does it go to the finance department and purchasing money?
We get the packet,
Yeah.
but that comes after after they've been paid. Now, we got the Visa MasterCard statements as well. But what this really takes the place of is all those little blanket purchase orders that you don't have to process the purchase order, which costs $150. You don't have to write a check for it. We wrote a check for somebody for a purchase for 23 cents the other day. That all goes away with P cards, and it'll be a much smoother operation. It'll save time upstairs. It'll allow purchasing to be much more responsive to the departments and the guys who are out in the field who need supplies to maintain our facilities. It makes it much easier for them as well.
The only thing I would like to say is that you just mentioned the Visa cards that you also give in addition to the P card Visa cards to some
I
other
think
people?
that the Visa cards, the old charge cards, will be past tense. Am I correct? Yes, I'm correct on that.
Okay, so everybody's gonna use the P card.
Everybody who signed up for it and
Mandatory.
signed the agreement. Once again, this is blanket POs of, it gotta be less than $3,999. This will not take the place of every purchase order. But it'll certainly make the system for the smaller dollar amounts it'll reduce the friction, as it were.
Yeah, but what I'm saying basically is that anybody who uses who has access to a Series Visa should actually be using a P card. Because when you do a purchase order that is bigger, that's a different process. So, what I'm saying is, why don't you eliminate the visas and
The visas are gone. They've been replaced by P cards.
Okay.
And, even the controller's office has one now, so.
Okay, good.
I have a question for the administration. The department heads used to get either a Visa or MasterCard, so are those gone now? They're all gone? Okay. That's answers the question. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else from council on the controller's report? Okay. Administration report.
Thank you, Mr. President. I apologize for being late. I was up at the PPL Center helping to light the menorah for Hanukkah, and I want to wish everyone, our Jewish friends and families, a happy Hanukkah. And also, at this time, I would like, if you can indulge you in the bowing heads for a moment of silence for George Herbert Walker Bush Sr., the 41st President of the United States. I had the honor of meeting President Bush at Durham High School in 1992. A great human being, great president, great man. Thank you. That's my report, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Appointments. We have none. Okay, we'll go to ordinances for final passage. Bill 78.
Bill 78 adopts the liquid fuel fund budget for 2019.
Okay, anything more to say from the administration on that?
No, sir.
Anything from council? Nothing from council, anything from the public on Bill 78, liquid fuels fund? Seeing nobody, Mr. Hamlin, call the vote.
Okay, on the liquid fuels fund, Ms. Zappa?
Yes.
Mr. Greedy?
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks?
Yes.
Ms. Moda?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. Zuko?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes,
That's 78.
thank you very much. Bill 79, please.
Bill 79 adopts the 911 fund budget for 2019.
Okay, anything from the administration?
No.
Anything from council? Anything from the public? Seeing nobody, Mr. Hamlin?
Mr. Greedy?
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks.
Yes.
Ms. Moda.
Yes.
Mr. Robinson.
Yes.
Mr. Duco.
Yes.
Mr. Lane.
Yes.
Zappa.
Yes.
President, 78 nays.
Thank you very much. Bill 80, please.
80 adopts the Trexler Fund budget for 2019.
Okay, anything from the administration?
No, sir.
Public? Seeing nobody, vote please.
Hendricks.
Yes.
Ms. Moda.
Yes.
Mr. Robinson.
Yes.
Mr. Duco.
Yes.
Mr. Lane.
Yes.
Zappa.
Yes.
Mr. Reed.
Yes.
President, 78 and 2 nays.
Thank you very much. Bill number 81, please.
Bill 81 adopts the solid waste fund and the solid waste fee, which is staying the same.
Thank you very much. Anything from the administration?
No, sir.
Anything from council? Anything from the public? I see, yeah, there's a yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On Monday, you adopted budget amendment number 5. In budget number 5, you increased the cost of the solid waste fund by $49,657. And this bill appropriates $16,483,000. Should that number be increased to appropriate an additional $49,000?
We will turn that over to Mr. Hartson.
Spending more.
The final amendment, or the final version of the budget will include that amendment because it was part of budget memo number 5, so we will certainly include that as part of the final. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, who passes legislation, finance director or do you? I mean, he's telling you what he's gonna do, but we, people around, I like to use 7 people to pass laws. It's Mr. Hartzell passed the law, or you passed the law?
You asked the question, I asked Mr. Hartzell to explain it to you, that's all.
He's telling what he's going to do, but you didn't amend it yet.
I
He's gonna
think the
make a
budget
change.
memo becomes part of the budget.
It didn't become part of the ordinance, Mr. Chairman. It just told you what the costs were going to be, that's all it told you. It didn't tell you it's gonna appropriate an additional $49,000. You get a special opinion, Mr. Chairman.
Well, it's not done, right there he is. I think we're good, but.
The point is well taken. I do think that, because it was adopted by the budget memo and that was adopted by council, that we resolve that.
Mr. Chairman, the budget memo does not read with additional costs. So what's, in that, tonight then, what's the sense of passing ordinances? Budget memo has reference. And number 2, another question, since we have about $6 million in inappropriate balance, could council consider reducing the $375 fee that's in this ordinance? Could offset the real estate tax increase. Maybe you can increase it by $50, and this will offset the real estate tax increase. So I'll be happy with that consideration.
Mr. Hartzell, can you tell us what the impact of that would be?
The impact of any reduction in the solid waste fund would, as we pointed out in the, on page 363 of the budget proposal, the big book, I would say, that we had projected a closing balance at $784,205 in the solid waste fund based upon the appropriations and revenues that we were anticipating for the year. So we talk about the $49,000 that's being added to that. Okay, now we're $735,000. So we would run a serious risk if we were to reduce the solid waste fee of running that particular fund into negative territory.
Okay, thank you. Anything from my colleagues on council? Or anything else from the public? I'm sorry, we're still in the public.
Glenn Sickers, South Allentown. The $643,000, is that calculated in your number you just talked about? So we would have basically almost $1 million over if we included the revenue input on the $643,000 that normally you should pay. Is that correct?
Mr. Hunsicker is correct. That would be another $643,000 that would be added to it if we were making the payment of the repayment of the loan from the general fund to the solid waste fund. Be another 643 on top of it, yes.
And it should be noted, there's things in this solid waste fund that really shouldn't be in there. And I want to address the controller to look into this for next year, because they're loading this up over the years. Brought it way back when Fed Ed was in here. So there has to be an accountability to what goes in these proprietary funds. And we want them to step up to the plate and do the right thing. And we'll bring up the 646 later, I guess, the 643. At the end of this, you're going to talk about that?
Is it on the agenda here?
Somewhere up there.
It's an ordinance for introduction.
Yes.
Okay, we'll talk about that later.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else from the public? Seeing nobody, Mr. Hanlon.
Ms. Moda,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
Suzuko,
Yes.
Mr. McLean,
Yes.
Zappa,
Yes.
Mr. Greedy,
Yes.
Hendricks.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Bill number 82, please.
Bill 82 is a ordinance that adopts the stormwater fund budget for 2019 and the utility fee, setting the stormwater fee at $20 per 500 square feet impervious surface, and that's basically maintaining the same cost as last year.
Thank you very much. Anything from council? Administration?
No, sir.
Anything from the public on Bill 82? Seeing nobody, Mr. Hanlon.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
Suzuko,
Yes.
Mr. McLean,
No.
Zappa,
Yes.
Mr. Greedy,
No.
Mr. Hendricks,
Yes.
Ms. Mona.
No.
Mr. President, I have 4 yeas and 3 nays, it passes.
Thank you very much. Bill number 83, please.
Bill 83 is a ordinance that revises numerous fees in the Parks and Recreation Department.
Okay, anything else from the administration?
Yes.
Anything from council? Wait a minute.
We'll go back to Mr. Griffiths, please.
Okay.
Thank you. After Monday's meeting about some of the suggestions we received in reference to the swimming pool admission fees, we would like to amend from the ages of 2 to 59 to 4 to 59 in all of our admission fees.
Okay. Thank you. Just anything from council? Any questions or comments from council on this?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I just want to thank, Brian?
Mr. Griffin.
Mr. Griffin and, Ms.
Elshar.
I'm sorry. I was getting there.
Anybody else?
No, I wasn't the mayor.
No, sorry, no, not me, but you need anybody else?
No, that's it. For taking over this and, amending my request to increase it. I just felt that, it was, a lot more appropriate to, increase the age. It's really not gonna break the bank or the swimming pool. No point in talking, but, this one. So, I appreciate you calling me back and working on it with me and making sure that we can give those poor or lower income families a better chance to come over and enjoy the swimming pools, in the summertime. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Solicitor.
Mr. President, just the amendment should really be adopted or proposed by council. The council would need to suspend the rules to do that, so there should be a vote to suspend the rules. And then if that passes, a vote to amend that particular.
Mr.
Okay, then.
I just want to quickly say, thank you to Mr. Griffiths. You actually just changed my vote on this by doing that, so I appreciate you hearing what we said, going back and taking a look at it. That means a lot to me because I had the same feelings as Mr. Garidi did about concerns in this, and I think that that's a very amenable solution. I want to thank you for doing that. So, and I will make the motion to suspend the rules so we can make the amendment.
I'll second the motion.
We have a second, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So the amendment is going to be that it's going to move the age from 2 to 59 to 4.
Okay, you suspended the rules.
Somebody needs to make it.
I'll make the motion. The motion will be exactly that, we make the, change the bill to make the ages from 2 to 59 to 4 to 59.
And I'll second
4
that.
years to 59.
I'll second that, Mr. President.
Mr. Griffin, that's correct then. We're changing the age from 2 to 59 to 4 to 59,
Correct.
which was Julio's motion. Okay. Mr. Greedy's motion, I'm sorry. Also known as Julio.
Oh, thanks.
Okay, so we have a motion and we have a second. Now we need to vote on we're getting any public comments, yes. Any comment from the public on the?
Big on whole bill.
Right now, we're on the amendment, changing the age. Anybody else changing the age?
I think that it's a great idea.
I think so too. Okay.
Okay, on the amendment to change the age from 2 to 4 to 59. Mr. Zuko?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Zappa?
Yes.
Mr. Reedy?
Yes.
Hendricks?
Yes.
Mr. Mona?
Yes.
Mr. Robbins?
Yes.
Mr. President, it passes.
Thank you very much. Now we move to the bill itself. So we're at the public, Mr. Hirsch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for working inside and out. We have 3 bills on the agenda this evening that are raising the rates in Allentown. And my question is, Ms. Council has a budget for its increased revenue, because if we would increase the revenue in the general fund, this could decrease real estate tax increase. More revenue, less tax increase. So I'm asking you this evening if you can get the administration possibly to estimate or do something, and how much revenue the next 3, but this bill, the next 2 would bring in, because these bills are providing additional revenue, and with additional revenue, then we can reduce real estate taxes. But you have amended the general fund budget.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Hirsch. I don't think Bill 85 really does a lot, but Bill 83 and 84, we have an estimate.
I do. In fact, I asked staff today to come up with that. The overall impact on those fees in recreation and swimming pools, the estimated revenue increase to the general fund in 2019 is approximately $200,000.
Okay.
And, Mr. President, I'm sorry, Mr. Russell, is that reflected in the proposed budget?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Then, any,
Mr. Chairman.
we'll give you 30
Well,
seconds.
Mr. Robinson asked Mr. Hartzell, does it propose, is it the same? You would look in the budget, Mr. Robinson, the number is the same for 2019 as 2018, there's no increase.
Mr. Hirschman, I actually think if you look on page 2, because I looked at this the other night, I think it's, no, I'm sorry, I believe it's page 3 in.
You're in the full budget.
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm in the big book. Let's see here. Recreation fees, recreation.
Look at all the fees, maybe that, put some of them on. Look at all the fees.
Oh, there we go, I'm sorry. So it is on page 2, we were correct. Mr. Glazer and I had looked at this before. It's 000-3430 swimming pool fees. The 2018 budget amount is $225,000. The reflected amount for 2019 is $355,000. So, Mr. Archer, you said your staff said it was about $200,000, but when you look at it here, it's about $135,000.
Correct, and that, I was combining actually 3430 and 3435.
Okay, understood.
Not just the swimming pool fees.
I say when looking at the final numbers, I see exactly what you're saying here. So that includes the fees for the changes to the golf fund as well, and
The golf fund would be separate, and that would be,
I'm sorry.
that's going into the golf, the increases to Fund 091 would be a little over $100,000.
And that's the pavilion rentals and the changes that we made to the Grove rentals and things to that effect.
Yes.
Yes, and I apologize, I didn't mean golf fund when I said that. I apologize for that mistake. So thank you very much, Mr. Robinson. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. I think that answers the question, Mr. Reedy.
So what you're saying is the 462, 500, that's what it is? That's what we did?
Yes, sir.
Including all the changes that we just mentioned?
Including all the changes that were just mentioned tied to those activities that are funded out of the general fund, yes.
Now, that's not what was in 315, it was 315, 261, let's say 261, 687, which is in 2018.
What we're showing on that particular page, and this is on page 2 of the big book, by the way, for those who are looking onto that. We had anticipated $315,000 at the start of the year for revenue coming in from the combination of the swimming pool fees and the recreation programs. Obviously, given what had happened with the pools this summer, we did not collect as much revenue as we had anticipated for swimming pools. And so the A&E, which Mr. Garidi was just pointing out, showing that we were estimating about $262,000 that we were going to be bringing in revenue for this year. And the amount that we're then anticipating for next year, anticipating that the weather will be good and that the pools will be fully operable, is that we're looking between that and recreation at $462,500.
We keep on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
We're just talking pool. I addressed all 3 ordinances.
Mr. Hirschman, we're only talking ordinance of Bill 83 here.
Because I can show you they're the same. Go for the other permits.
Okay. Anybody else?
Okay, on the bill as amended,
As amended? Yes.
Mr. Zuko?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Ms. Zappa?
Yes.
Mr. Grady?
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks?
Yes.
Ms. Moda?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
President, that's 7 yeas, and
Thank you very much. Bill number 84, please.
Bill 84 amends Article 395, Community and Economic Development Fees by adding a number of definitions, authorizing the Director of Community and Economic Development or their designee to, gives them the authority to waive city fees, and increases the number of fees to better capture the costs of providing a particular service.
Okay, thank you. Anything from the administration?
Yes, Mr. White, Mr. Chairman.
So in reference to addressing the regular community economic, so in reference to waiving the community and economic specific.
Yeah, give Mr. McMahon one that doesn't work.
Seems like you have a preference for it. So waiving the community and economic development, or giving the community and economic development director the ability to waive city fees. As you see, I passed out to you earlier this afternoon or this evening, that we're only looking to waive the city fees. So it makes no sense for our building maintenance or any parks or any of our internal departments to come in and apply for a building permit, pay us, and it goes right into the same fund. So we're trying to just make sure we have the ability to waive that fee if necessary.
Okay, thank you very much. Anything from council?
I just want to say that that's an excellent recommendation, and it's the right way to do it. Saves time, saves money, and transfer from one account to another, and I'm congratulated on doing that.
Yeah, just common sense.
Yep.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules so we can add language to that effect to Bill 84.
I'll second it. Second by Mr. Zuko. Good.
Mr. Kloiber, could you, and Mr. Hanlon, just give us the exact section that would need to be, where the language need to be altered? I just want to make sure that we're amending the language properly. And I don't seem to be able to find
But
it.
if you give us the ability to just slip it in after we review it.
That's what, yeah, because then I'm just concerned that the language flows properly, and we don't create an issue. So I will also make a motion to add the language to the bill stating that, I'll just read the whole purpose into the record that Mr. Leitner handed out, because I think that is very clear. That the bill will be amended, in the reference to the Community Economic Development Director having the ability to waive fees, to provide policies and procedures for the Community Economic Development Director to waive facility fees, departmental service charges, fee schedules, and other related community and economic development fees established by the City of Allentown for use of city-owned and operated properties or projects only. And I would just ask for a second.
Yeah.
Councilman President, I don't think the vote has taken place as to suspending the rules, so that the vote should take place first and then.
Okay, that's right. All right. Then I guess Mr. Hammond will call vote for suspending the rules.
Okay, the rules for suspending the rules. Mr. Greedy?
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks?
Yes.
Ms. Zappa?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Ms. Moda?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. President, 7 yeas.
Okay, and now we can take the verbiage that Mr. Robinson had, would be placed in the proper, and I'm looking at it online here, and there's a bunch of pages, so.
Yeah, I was quickly trying to page through and see, and that's why I wasn't sure if we might have known the exact spot. If not, yes, just to add that language at the appropriate spot.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty nice place. It's 39504, where it's authorized.
Where it's authorized, yeah.
Yep, so that's gonna be, yes, okay, right here.
Okay. Yep. So, oh yeah, this is there. Done. Okay, so now we will vote on the amendment.
Opportunity for comment.
Yeah, public comment, sorry. Trying to get out of here without talking as little as possible. Okay, seeing nobody. Now we're to the vote.
Okay, on the vote to add that purpose to the waiver of fees. Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Ms. Zappa?
Yes.
Mr. Greedy?
Yes.
Ms. Hendricks?
Yes.
Ms. Moda?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. Zuko?
Yes.
President, 7 yeas and no nays.
Thank you very much. Now we're on to the bill itself. We had public comment already, right?
Not on the bill.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not trying to.
We're being very lenient with you tonight.
Well,
This is your first time on two bills.
I don't want to look like I'm gonna pick on Mr. Robbins, I'm not.
Please don't make it general, yeah.
He understands it very well. And my concern was all these fees, I think what Mr. Arthur pointed was swimming pools, but if you look at the budget, Mr. Chairman, let's start with the first one. Building permits, it's the same, Mr. Robinson, right? There's no increase in revenue.
What I would have just said is, when I was referring to, I was just referring to the specific bill. I think it's fair for us to ask if Mr. Hartzell and Mr. Lecker can point
But
us.
I'm looking, that's 200,000, but now you look at these other bills, Mr. Robinson.
Right, I would just say
If
that
I
now,
increase it, is that we can reduce the real estate tax.
well, I would ask that if, now that we're on Bill 84, if we could ask Mr. Hartzell to refer to us
Good, that's good.
if there's a change in that, and then I would say the same thing when we get to Bill 85.
Thank you.
Do that. I think that's very fair, Mr. Hartzell.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. 'Cause that's my concern, we can reduce the tax.
Of course. I'll ask the question. If we could, yeah. Or if, Leonard, if you can answer that, yeah.
All right, so can we-
So the question would be the change in the fees. I guess what Mr. Hirschman is saying that when you, and him looking, looking at the budget book, he does not see that there's a difference between the amount of fees that are being addressed here, Bill 84, between the 2018 number and the 2019 number. So if you could just address if that is reflected in the budget and those amounts, please, for just the Bill 84, and then we'll probably come back for 85.
It is not reflected in the budget. We did not include the fee increases that we were proposing in this budget, so he's absolutely correct. It is the same from last year to this year. However, last year when we presented to you guys before, remember we were presenting a planning and zoning and building at the same time. We did have it in the budget at that time. So this year we didn't change anything. We left it the same because we wanted to re-present it. We had to, as last time we brought it as a combination, and this year we were looking at splitting them up. So that's why it looks the same.
Okay, so then I guess from what, yeah, that's a fair answer. And from what Mr. Hirschman was asking on the previous bill, I would then say to Mr. Kloiber, is it a similar situation? Well, I guess it's not similar because Mr. Hartzell had included the changes in fees in the proposed budget. So that was slightly different in the last one than this is. The increase is not included, so is there a need to amend the amount? Or did the budget memo 4? Is budget memo 4, would that qualify as changing it even though the amount itself was not changed in the accounts?
I think likely the budget memo 4, doing it through that process would have been sufficient to.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Boyer. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robinson.
It's the same thing for 85 as well, so we can just cover it and not have to come back to this.
That's a very good point, Mr. Reed. And that's the case, Mr. Leitner? Okay. Yes. Very good.
We'll still have to open it up, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, we know the answer.
Good idea.
We don't have to ask it again.
Okay, on Bill 84 is amended, Mr. McLean.
Yes.
Zappa.
Yes.
Mr. Grady.
Yes.
Mr. Henry.
Yes.
Ms. Moda.
Yes.
Mr. Robinson.
Yes.
Mr. Zuko.
Yes.
Mr. That's a unanimous.
Thank you very much. Bill 85.
Bill 85 amends Article 395 as well by increasing zoning and planning fees, permit application fees, local plan review fees, and establishes a hard application review fee.
All right, thank you. Before we get any further, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Stewart, I had asked if we could get a copy of the survey that we used.
I have it with me.
Okay, it would be nice if we could have had it before now, but, so we could look at it, but we'll take a minute to look at it. Anyhow, Mayor, if you guys want to address anything on this while we're passing it out and looking at it. If not, just bear with us for a minute or two. Just move them up.
What page are you working on? I found it on YouTube. Look for Lee High Valley Cafe on YouTube.
We can share it on there too.
Yeah. But I also posted to a Facebook group called All of You Allentown Together. And that's where the discussion centers.
But live right now,
It's on YouTube. Might not be there much longer though. No, seriously, I'm thinking about going over to Facebook, but I'm not sure of the video coding yet.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but I'm not seeing a lot of figures for these other municipalities.
The reason that it's difficult to actually do comparisons between municipalities is each municipality charges fees with different formulas. What I tried to do with the exhibit in highlight in yellow are in different municipalities where there's similar fee to that which we're proposing to change or increase our fees to. For example, under permit application, we're proposing to go from $55 to $100, and I pointed out that South Whitehall, also charges $100. The other municipalities don't necessarily charge for permit fees. And again, as I've tried to make the point in past discussions, what we're trying to do is to increase fees to help to cover the time that staff puts in on evaluating applications. And particularly, I think it's on the second or third page, where, I believe it's the third page, where we address the preliminary plan for major land developments. And that's where we start out with a base fee of $1,000 and then go through a formula for additional fees for, different kinds of uses. You can see that, Pittsburgh, Bethlehem, South Whitehall, and Easton all approach things with that type of formula. The point being is that the major land developments, and you can look at City Center and hopefully very soon, the waterfront. They're big projects that are proposed by developers who will benefit from all the staff time that we put in. The fees actually, considering the budget of those large major land developments, are minuscule to the overall multi-million dollar construction budgets. But the staff puts in an extreme amount of time for these major land developments. There's page after page after page of blueprints. We have engineering, we have traffic, we have planners reviews, administrative costs, all put in, and the developer is the one that benefits. The point is also that if the developer is the one that benefits from all our time, they should take the brunt of that cost and not the individual citizenry of the city. It's to put the cost to the entity that's going to benefit the most. I'm very sensitive to the fact that the city budget includes costs that get spread across the city. It's my thought to where we can identify a cost that is specific to one entity's benefit, that it not go across the citizenry, but it go to that entity that's going to benefit.
And I think we all agree with that, but.
Just, man,
Disagree.
thank you. Just one observation, and it's that, you know, although some of these new increased fees are even less in some cases, in very small, I mean, not too many cases, but let's say in Pittsburgh, if you're looking at the rezoning one, which is $1,000 versus $1,200. I just want to make sure that we're not marketing ourselves out of redevelopment because of these. And comparable municipalities like ours, for example, Erie, you know, I have the same type of population, even Reading to some extent. I'm not comparing ourselves to South Whitehall or Whitehall or Philadelphia, and even Pittsburgh. I'm looking at municipalities that are like ours. We are in an upward moving area. You know, some of the municipalities like Lancaster, they have the Chris, I think Reading has the Chris, and Bethlehem has the Chris. You know, with NIS, we are actually bringing a lot more development. The problem is that there's only about 2 or 3 developers that are developing in our city at this point, you know, and you know, I want to make sure that we're marketable as we do increase fees.
If I may respond to that, and I can give you an example. Before the Planning Commission, there's been a proposal by a real estate firm from Florida at Susquehanna and 4th. The interested party is a Wawa. There were 4 parcels that were zoned residential and the rest was zoned commercial. And it had been used partially for commercial use, and then there are 4 residences there. I encouraged that the applicant go through a rezoning of the 4 parcels so that the entire property was zoned commercial, since that they wanted to use the entire block for commercial. There was no question that the application fee would be paid and that they would go through that process. When an applicant is looking for a rezoning, it's not normally an individual citizen on an individual lot. It's normally a commercial or industrial manufacturing operation. And $1,000 for an application fee for a rezoning is not an issue, and it just helps. And there's so much effort of staff time, there's so much effort that we put in, it helps to just cover some of the cost. And again, the point being is that it's not usually a residential individual citizen, it's a commercial operation, and we're taking the burden off of the citizens.
I understand that. I just want to make sure that we are clear on that, because as you know, I sit in the Havana Planning Commission as well, and I see the developments that are going on around our city. And you know, because we're landlocked, pretty much, we don't have that much available developable, properties in the city, like, unlike some of the other, municipalities, that still have so much land, and they can put a warehouse there, for example, and attract more jobs, and they're doing it all over the island, just wanna make sure that we are in the market.
Yeah, I don't think it's a problem.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Anything else from council?
If no one else, I have one quick thing. I agree with Mr. Garidi that we want to make sure not to price ourselves out of the market. That is a concern, but I will say that with this, I have one question for you, Mr. Stewart, which is, when we do look at areas that have far more green space to be developed than what we're looking at with redevelopment, would you say that it is a more difficult or less difficult task to look at planning and rezoning for an urban environment where it's reuse, or a green field where infrastructure has to be constructed? Which would be more difficult in your opinion?
Well, it's comparing apples and oranges.
Okay.
But the process is still the same. We go through, reviewing the land, the existing documents, what the governing zoning ordinance is. We look at where infrastructure is. It's a whole series of process. Just sometimes the issues are different, and we may have different traffic issues, but the process is the same. And I would guess that the amount of time that gets put in for either the greener area versus the urban area is about the same.
Okay. The one other thing I will say is, I support these fee increases because I do think that there's a lot of staff time put in. And I think that we have a situation right now where, as Mr. Garidi pointed out, we only have a few developers who are doing work in the NIS currently, and they receive a good amount of subsidies from the state. And I think that this is a good way to make sure that the taxpayers of Allentown aren't additionally subsidizing work that has to go into those projects. So I think that making them pay for the greater interest on the staff review is a very good point. And I also agree with you, $1,000 for a developer is cost of doing business. You look at a project like Tower 5, that's probably how much they're just spending on hard hats. If not, that might even not be enough for that. So I think that this is a fair move forward, and we have to remember, we are the third largest city in the Commonwealth. We're on the move. We have more development going on than any other third-class city. I would say in terms of our activity of development, we probably are on par with a city like Pittsburgh or a city like Philadelphia in terms of percentage of land being developed and percentage of staff time necessary for it. So I want to thank you and your staff for the work that you did, and I thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
Just got another thing that I wanted to clarify, since you were talking, thank you, Mr. Robinson, for bringing some of those things up. I just want to make sure if people want to change something, this only for commercial, not for residential, any of this for commercial, not. I'm just thinking of a small business, all right? Huh? Small business would not be, like a city small business that want to redevelop their property, let's say a restaurant on 7th Street, for example, okay, and they want to redevelop. Would that fall onto these increases as well?
Probably not. A small business, let's say they wanted to change the use from restaurant to something that is not permitted in that zoning district. For something small like that, it would be appropriate that they approach the zoning hearing board for a use variance. And that's an entirely different process. What we're really talking about is the larger parcels of ground that might be redeveloped, particularly if something had been used for manufacturing and now there seems to be a demand, let's say, for retail. It really applies to the larger parcels.
Okay. Including the permit?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else from council? Anybody from the public? Bill 85.
Okay, on Bill 85, Ms. Zappa?
Yes.
Mr. Grady?
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks?
Yes.
Mona?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. Zuko?
Yes.
McLean?
Yes.
Thank
Thank you very much. Bill 77, please.
Bill 77, adopts the general fund, the administrative order fund, the risk management fund, the debt service fund, the equipment fund, the golf course fund for 2019. 2019 in the
Mr. President, if I may, before we vote on this, I was actually gonna make a motion to suspend the rule to introduce another bill. And that is a bill that was a redefined bill of the omnibus bill that we presented last Monday, okay? Which was voted down. You know, and one of the things that I will say that we all want to have lower taxes, obviously. We don't want to give such a big blow to the residents for 27% increase. And most of us were looking to lower that percentage to be less than the 27%. We're looking at a quarter percentage less, millage, I'm sorry, quarter millage less. We couldn't get there, so I came up with another option, which was gonna be a little bit less than the 1.25 million that we're asking on Monday, on the books. So, in doing so, I had the votes already to do it. I spoke the solicitor spoke to me about it and said that because of the timing, doing it now, it probably would violate I guess it would be the sunshine law, if I may say. And perhaps I can ask Matt to explain it a little bit better, why we cannot do it. Then that's for the benefits of everybody, but particularly for those people who are going to vote.
The thoughts would be, if, to put forward the omnibus motion as it had been on Monday, would have been a motion for reconsideration. A motion for reconsideration would have had to have been moved by one of the council members who was on the prevailing end of that vote. So that would be one, if the omnibus motion was going to be presented. To the extent there's a motion that we presented that would change some of those terms, arguably that could still be considered part of the motion for reconsideration, because it's essentially, changes that could have been made on Monday would be made now, so it could have been considered a motion for reconsideration. And again, would apply to those rules where one of the people on the prevailing side would have had voted. There are instances in the past where council has suspended rules for significant issues. Today, that happened a few occasions for more nominal issues. There are rules in the past, or times where council has done it in the past, but the council that our office offered is it's not advisable to do that, and it's questionable. And a big part of that is under the council rules themselves. They require that notice of any amendments be placed published 2 days. It's published for the benefit of the other members of council. It's published for the benefit of the administration, but it's also published for the benefit of the public. So they have an opportunity to review those amendments. They have an opportunity to prepare any challenges or comments that they have to do that. And it's advisable to follow that, because it serves important procedures of making sure that decisions are made out in the open, that they're made, the deliberations are done openly. And it's just, council, I think, adopted those rules likely because of them, to make it an open process. And while council may have discretion at times to amend the budget and to suspend those rules, it really is advisable to do that only under unique circumstances. The rules that the council also has in place has where you against voting for an amendment on the day that the final passage of the budget would be passed, I think is to allow for a reasoned and deliberate process that enables those who are necessary to evaluate the different numbers and calculations have the opportunity to do so, which is can be impeded, would be impeded if it's done on the day of the event itself. So it's the advice again is there in the past, council has at times made amendments to the budgets that have been, or proposed amendments that were significant. What's in the past is in the past. What would be advisable is to stick with the rules that council has, and at the time to have made those amendments has passed, And it is not advisable to do that today, in the interest of making sure that, to stick to the council rules and making sure that everyone had been provided sufficient notice to really consider what was proposed and to evaluate those and to be able to respond.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much.
So saying that I'm not going to submit the, amendment that I had, because, obviously want to conform with the council rules and laws, and public. However, this amendment would have cut the tax, if it would pass, and I think it would have cut the tax blow, by, 20%, of the additional, increases. So that's it.
Okay, so there was no second on your request for suspension.
Well, there was no motion.
Oh, he asked for suspension of the
Well,
rules.
I was gonna ask for a suspension.
Right, you said you would have.
I would have asked, I didn't ask because I want to have an explanation, because I had already talked to some of the members that were gonna second it. So, saying that, well, I'm not gonna ask for a suspension, but I wanted to at least explain it to the public and to my fellow council members. I know it's complicated.
Okay.
I know it's complicated, but it comes to you later.
No, it's not complicated, it's pretty simple to me. I understand exactly what you're doing.
You seem confused.
No, I'm not confused at all.
Oh, good.
Okay. All right, so we're now on Bill 77. After all that, anything from council? Anything from the administration? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Zuko.
Well, I want to say this, obviously, as well as Mr. Robinson, this is my first time going through the budget. I want to tell you, I spent a lot more hours on it than we spent up here in the last month and a half. And I want to say this, I think I successfully changed the language from the budget book and detail book to the big book and little book. By the time you were done, everyone referred to those terms. So, Mr. Controller.
My hat's off to you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
I applaud you.
Thank you. But I will say this, folks. This is a very difficult time for us. I think in this city, we have a lot of different factions of people. We have a lot of different levels of income for people. Their way they survive, the way they live. Obviously, for the last 13 years, there should have been a tax increase. Little by little, we would not be at this stage we're at. That, I don't want to put blame on anybody. Now it's too late to put blame on anybody. We have to try to fix the problem going forward. But I gotta tell you, sleeping on this, losing sleep on this, I cannot in good conscience make the people of this city pay 27% tax increase. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zuko, and if we could keep things in government that simple on all levels and everything. Okay, anybody else in council? Comments?
I'd like to make a comment, Mr. President.
Bill 77.
Yes, thank you. I too was very strongly in favor of the omnibus bill, and the newspaper today said that change would have been minimal. It would have been $42 of a $236 increase of the annual average homeowner. To me, that's not minimal. That's an 18% reduction. I think it was achievable. Unfortunately, it did not pass, but I strongly felt that that was something we could have done, and unfortunately, it didn't happen. And I too feel very strongly that this will impact our citizens to a great degree. And I'm only disappointed that we were not able to get this accomplished. I was very much in favor of it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. We spent a few hours trying to find cuts on Monday night, so anybody from the public? Seeing nobody from the public, Mr. Hanlon, Bill 77.
Okay, on Bill 77, and again, that adopts the general fund, the administrative order fund, the risk management fund, the debt service fund, the equipment fund, the golf course fund, and they adopt a tax rate. Mr. Grady?
No.
Mr. Hendricks?
No.
Ms. Moda?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Ms. Zuko?
No.
Ms. McLean?
No.
Ms. Zappa?
Yes. Yes.
Mr. President? 3 yeas and 4 nays, it fails.
Okay, thank you. Resolutions for final passage, R 128, please.
R 128 adopts the capital improvement program for 2019 through 2023.
Anything from the administration on R 128?
No, sir.
Anything from council? Anything from the public?
Good evening, one second. This capital improvements plan, which one is it? Is it the one we produced, or you produced about a month or so ago? Is that the same thing? Has been any changes to this? Or is this the expenditure budget in the budget? It's not that one.
This would be a 5-year plan that had kind of the aspirational pieces included within it. This is not the budget portion.
It says November, so was there anything added in the I have?
I have not had time to make those changes.
I guess what I'm asking then is, what is this adoption do? Does that include all the expenditures for all the existing projects that are in here and how they're gonna be funded? Or is that just approving the capital projects as they stand in this book with no monies attached to them? Because there's a problem here in paying for this. I mean, figure it out.
Go ahead, Mr. Hudson.
Yes, sure, thank you. The portion of the capital budget that is the actual expenditure for the year you had just reviewed, that was part of Bill 77, because that was included as part of the general fund budget, so you had just made your decision on that particular bill. The 5-year capital improvement plan is, as I had pointed out some time ago, more of an aspirational document in which it is showing, for the most part, what departments, if there were no restrictions placed upon resources, if they could go out, we could go out for bonds, or we could get additional grants, et cetera, would be the intentions of the departments to be able to build upon for the next 5 years. This will not have, in its current form, any effect on what is actually being budgeted this year for capital expenditures. That was part of the general fund budget.
You guys feel comfortable with this? Because, I mean, there's a lot of misunderstanding here on how we're gonna pay for all this stuff, but, I mean, if you're just gonna say, this particular R 128 adopts the overall program, I have no problem with that. Not attaching money to it, to pay for it, is another problem, because we don't have the resources to pay this. Now, maybe there's an explanation how we do this, but maybe when you adopt this, you do say, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna stick to this plan to some degree, but there has to be modifications on how we fund it. If you went and funded everything in the book that I looked at, you have a $55 million cost, but you can't. So, I mean, somewhere along the line there, we have to have a discussion on how to do this. So, okay. I mean, approving this, I don't know what that means.
Okay, Mr. Hurts was going to.
Mr. Hunsaker's point is well taken. It is that the only portion of the budget that we are actually financing is the portion that was included as part of the capital projects fund, that was included within the general fund budget itself. Nothing that is showing in the 5-year plan per se. And there are 5-year plans like state transportation budgets in which there is clearly intended to be some financing in place over those 5-year period to cover all of those things, and it's the intention of Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that they're going to do those things in terms of transportation. Here, this is more saying, we don't have the money. If we had it, this is what we think we need to do over the next 5 years. And there's no commitment in terms of actually spending on those monies in the amounts that are listed in there.
One other question. If you don't approve this, do all the capital projects stop? Or you can still do the projects you were just talking about? You can still do them, or does this sort of?
funded.
But the ones that are funded, including those out of the bond issues that already have authority to do so, yes. Those can still be.
We'd have to have a listing of those then, but okay. We'll have to work that out.
Sure.
Quick question.
Mr. Green.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. On that vein, I mean, Mr. Hunziker is correct, and so is Mr. Parso in regards to how much money we have available to do the project. What I wanted to make sure is that we're only gonna do the projects on money that we have available in the fund, but that if you have any other projects that you wanna do, that you come back to us and let us know, okay? Initially, I wanted to actually suspend the capital project for the next 6 months until we identify where the money's gonna come from for some of them. But you're saying, I think if I hear you right, you're saying that you will only do those projects, they're mentioned in the plan, they're not necessarily gonna be doable, all of them, because we don't have the funds.
That is correct, Mr. Green.
Okay, so I'm okay with that if you do it. All right, great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Thank you.
Council President, if I may, just the Home Rule Charter, Section 811, I believe, is what requires the capital plan, and it has very detailed requirements as to what's to be in there. And I believe that's what we're looking at here. And this would seem to conform with that.
Okay. Anybody else from council? And we were at the public, but anybody else from the public?
Good evening again, Tom Hahn. I'm always impressed when new words come up like inspired. So I want to let you know that I'm inspired to make $100,000 next year, but I don't think that's going to happen. So the people who are going to get all the benefits from the increase for 27% increase in the tax that are inspiring to have all these benefits, I think we should lower their expectations and vote in a different way, because it's not fair. Because you can inspire to be wonderful or great or do good, but if reality isn't there and the money isn't there to do it, I think it's sad, and I think we should work on that.
Bill 77 did not pass, Mr. Hunt. Okay, anybody else from the public? Seeing nobody.
Okay, on the adoption of the capital improvement program, Mr. Hendricks,
Yes.
Ms. Mota,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
Mr. Zuko,
Yes.
Mr. Klein,
Yes.
Ms. Zappa,
Yes.
Mr. Greedy,
Yes.
President Sidney,
Thank you very much. Bill R-132, please.
R-132 approves administrative regulation on sexual harassment.
We saw that earlier tonight. So it was moved favorably to the council. It was so long ago.
That was my-
It was yours, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to have a discussion. Anything else from council members on that?
I think Mr. Robinson made some good points in regards to things that need to be done, and I agree with them. So we just have to make sure that those are researched and put in there.
Yes, and I think that Mr. Green's right on that, but I think that this policy, I think we can pass this tonight with the idea that those changes can be made after they're properly researched and looked, but I think it's good to have this in place starting immediately, and then in a few weeks to a month or more, we can make those additional changes after they've been properly researched and written.
I think that our human resources director, but just with this, is showing she knows what's going on. there.
Could
So
not
I have
agree
all that.
more.
I have
Could
faith
not
in
agree
that.
more.
So, anything from the public on our 132? Mr. Hanley?
On R132, Ms. Moda.
Yes.
Mr. Robinson.
Yes.
Mr. Zuko.
Yes.
Ms. Appa.
Yes.
Mr. Reedy.
Yes.
Mr. Nix.
Yes.
Mr. Glenn.
Yes.
Presents some yeas.
Thank you very much. And in ordinances for introduction, we have Bill 86, and that's going to go to Budget and Finance. Mr. Greasy.
Thank you.
Okay, Bill 86 is an ordinance of the Council of the City of Allentown, amending ordinance 15246 relating to the 2016 loan from the city's solid waste fund to the city's general fund, authorizing a revision to the loan's repayment schedule by postponing the next year's.
You're talking 2019. Okay, well, that's gonna go to, that's gonna go to Mr. Garidi and, okay? Next question, second.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, Council President, there is an opportunity for public comment in referring it to committee.
Okay. Public comment on Bill 86?
South Allentown. When I first heard about this, I didn't think it was proper. And I thought council should look at this as a regular loan that the administration is defaulting on. They should have never put this in the budget, that this was counted on as revenue, taken out of the solid waste. It's not proper. What you're doing here, and it might not end with this administration. If you're starting to take monies out of proprietary funds, it's not the correct thing to do. I don't know the legality of taking money from proprietary funds, even when they did this originally through an ordinance, because they needed the money. But once you go down this path, and when somebody over here was, a day or two ago was saying we're gonna have another proprietary fund, and they say it's locked up, the money is only gonna be used in that particular area. Well, this just shows it isn't. You have to force the administration to go by what they passed. If they pass an ordinance, you gotta live by it, or change the ordinance, what they're trying to do here. But that doesn't say this is proper. It's a way of getting out of this problem, but you shouldn't really do it. You should force the administration to pay and live up to the previous ordinance that was written. You should do that. You have to look at this as a regular loan, the same thing. Okay, if they wanna do this, give the solid waste people interest. Maybe $50,000 or 5% interest or 2% interest. And let's see if they do it. It'd be the same thing if you went to the bank. Oh, I want to extend this, rewrite the loan. Well, it'd be all kinds of fees. This is free. It's not free to us. But the documentation and the controller should insist that they don't do this. Now, whether they listen to them or not is another story. It's up to the body here to do this. I would recommend you turn this down. You should.
I'd like to get more information from our solicitor in regards to that. I mean, I'm not sure if proprietary funds, just like the stormwater fund, you know, it's supposed to be in the lockbox. We did it already, I know, but according to what he's saying, it's illegal to do this. I'm not going to get the legality of it. I mean, I know that we've done it, but I don't know if it is legal, and I'd like to see if you do a little bit of research on that. Let us know, if we are talking, I want to stay within the laws, Mr. Glazer. I want Mr. Glazer and Mr. Robinson, I want to stay within the law, and you probably have something to contribute on this, but, you know, we got to make sure that we said that we're going to turn the city around, that we're going to be transparent, and we're going to do the right thing, starting with this new mayor, and I want to make sure that we do the right thing, that we follow the law when we do things in our, because it's the seven of us, you know, and it's our names out there. If we are violating our own laws, then what the heck, you know? So I'd like to get some form of research. Excuse me? Yes, definitely. And then I'm not, you know, barging you or anything. I mean, we've done this before.
No,
I just want to make sure that
we want
do it right.
to, yeah, I was up there when we approved this, I was up there, okay? We want to follow the law also. Believe me, we do.
I know, thank you.
Okay, anything else from public? No, he's gonna research.
Oh,
He's
okay.
gonna research and get us an answer. Yeah.
Yeah, he can.
Good evening again, Tom Hahn. I bring prefacing what's going to happen or what I'm going to say here with a little humor all evening. But we are not in the loan business. The city is not in the loan business. We have a history that goes back to changing the names of different funds. We even have some of that fund being used to refinance $3.5 million that's in the process, and we still don't know if the bonds were sold, that came out of a fund that was supposed to save the city money on a $10 million loan, that $5 million was supposed to be put in a lockbox. At that time, they called it a lockbox, and since then changed the different names. And now here we are, again, with no rules and regulations to protect the public. Now, if we take this, let's say, 642 for the next, 7 years? Where does it stop? If they don't have any money this year, and next year's budget will be 1.25 million if we use the same budget that we have this year with the expenditures, they can't pay for it next year, and the year after that. Now, let's get rid of that fund and start giving the money back to the taxpayers so they can lower the tax rate that they're gonna pay. There was $9 million in there when we started. And then the 4.5 went out. Why are we charging them $375 to collect the garbage when they can use it for all these other fees that no one took out of the budget? Now, everybody likes negotiations. I say, pay this off and invest it, and then reap the benefit. We're not in the loan business. Why is this even being considered? How do you justify saying, oh, okay, we overcharged the public, that the fund built up $9 million, and now we'll just loan it out? Would you do it out of your pocket? Would you do it out of your pocket? Whose pocket is it coming out of? The people who have to pay the taxes. Why should they have to pay the taxes? Come on, let's get something straight. One time for sure, we know the past history, it didn't work. And it doesn't look like it's gonna work again.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public? Seeing nobody. Resolutions for an introduction, I see none. Any new business? How about good and welfare?
Just one thing, and I think all my colleagues would agree with me, and the public would agree with me. We're very fortunate to have Mr. Kloiber, because this guy is right on the money when he needs to be. So I want to thank you, sir, for your contribution to this dais.
And if I may, I mean, we've been through a lot of budget hearings. I've been here for at least 17 of them. And this budget hearing, although we don't always agree on everything, especially Mr. Robinson and I, but I think it was a very cordial one. The administration did a wonderful job in explaining things to us and getting the information we needed, so the law department as well. You know, I remember one time we were here until 1 o'clock in the morning and trying to pass a budget. And, you know, what time is it now? It's not even 9 o'clock, and we're getting ready to leave. So I'd like to thank the administration, I'd like to thank all the staff of the city for indulging us, and the public, as well as my fellow council members. I know I talked a lot, and I have a lot of questions. That's my responsibility. and it's not a criminal one, it's my responsibility to ask those questions and to make sure that we understand and make sure that I can explain it to the larger part of the community, because I have to translate this into Spanish a lot of time. So it's something that people don't understand. Cynthia and I both, it's Mota and I both have to translate in Spanish, and when DJ Marks over at La Mega asks me questions, I have to be on top of it, because he has a lot of questions. But anyway, that's part of the reason.
Mr. Gorilla, make sure that you let also the community as a whole, that we do all care about the community, because that's what we signed, to be here in city council, because we care. We don't get paid the big bucks to be here for hours. We're here because we do care about the community.
And that goes, as I said, to all my fellow council members.
I gotta take exception to one thing you said tonight, when you said about Mr. Robinson, I thought you guys went to marriage counseling since Monday night.
Talking about marriage counseling. Now that we're there, and you opened up Pandora box, I think somebody gotta go to marriage counseling. After last night, no, was it Monday night?
It was
Monday night. It's over.
Mr. President, I just have something, and the best place I could figure out to ask these questions was under good and welfare. Mr. Kloiber, if we end up having a default budget, because we were unable to pass one tonight, and if by the 15th, we can't come up with another idea to vote on, the amendments that were proposed tonight with a suspension of the rules, the change to the swimming fees and also the change to the language in Bill 84 about Mr. Leitner's authority on the permits, would those changes stay in place in a default budget, or would they not stay in place in a default budget?
I think I would have confirmed that, but I don't think they would be in place with the default budget.
And that was my assumption as well, but I would just ask, Mr. Mayor, if that ends up happening, if by January, if we could look at bringing forward ordinances to codify the change to the swimming fee, the change to the authority in the permitting, and then also with the home fund, since obviously that would not change as well, the idea of bringing forward a plan. And I actually believe that we would have to do that anyway, because Mr. Russell, correct me if I'm wrong, but if there's no breakdown in accounts in that enterprise fund, no money can actually be spent in that. So we had that from the beginning anyway. That was a mistake on my part the other night. I didn't realize that we had that. I just thought of that yesterday. So I would just ask that you would consider bringing forward 2 ordinances, one to change the ability for language and one to make sure that the swimming fees change to what we agreed to tonight.
Yes, we will consider that. And Mr. President McLean, may I make a comment?
Absolutely.
I, along with Mrs. Zuckel and Mr. Robinson, this is my first budget sitting on this side, okay? And it's a whole different chair, and I'm not making light of anything up there. I know you all did your homework. I think I was here Saturday. I think I saw Mr. Zuckel's car downstairs. I think you're upstairs for many hours, okay? I'm not making light of what you're doing up there. And believe me, sitting here, they say this is the mayor's proposed budget. It's probably the mayor's proposed budget. It is my budget, but right here, every one, every one. I made this commitment. This is one hell of a team. I stand with them. I stand in front of them. I stand beside them. I stand behind them. This is one hell of a team. You're not going to get a better team in municipal government than this team out here. I'll tell you that right now. At any given time, I could call any of them. Please come up to my office. They're here in 1 minute. Okay? My respect for these people is tremendous. What they do day in and day out. I sit on the 10th floor, I'm the mayor. These, like I said once before, these are the worker bees. These are the people who do it every day to help the citizens and the residents of the city of Allentown. I might hold the title as a mayor, but these are the people who do the day-to-day operation every day. And I'm so damn proud of these people, it's unbelievable. Okay, unbelievable. And I just want to tell you, and I promised when I was appointed mayor, whatever it's called, I'm still the mayor. I promised you I would be here every meeting. Every meeting. I have not missed one meeting in 9 months, and I will continue to be here. We will continue to work together. We do agree to disagree, and that's fair. Legislative, executive branch, that's fair. I have tremendous respect for you, and I think we have earned, our team has earned respect this year that wasn't there in the past, okay? And I thank you, and we'll move forward together. And together we will make the city get stronger and better day by day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and having worked with many of those people sitting behind you for many years, I wholeheartedly agree. But,
I just want to say one thing, Mr. Mayor. If Craig can get up here off in 1 minute, he needs to slow down.
I watch the speed limit.
Okay. We did good in welfare, I think. We have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay. Good night.